Breaking news, anger mounting over the handling of the sudden firings of dozens of U.S. attorneys by the Trump administration. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Dozens of prosecutors told to clean out their desks by midnight in a move that one source says, quote, could not have been handled any worse. What's behind the surprise purge? Plus, the White House acknowledges that Team Trump, new fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, lobbied on behalf of a foreign power, Turkey, during the campaign, but says the president did not know. So let's get right to our breaking news now. The surprise firings of dozens of U.S. attorneys tonight. Here with me now is CNN's Jessica Snyder and legal analyst Laura Coates. Good evening to both of you. Jessica, you first. You have new reporting tonight, I understand, about the U.S. attorneys fired tonight. The issue here is how this request was handled. So what are your sources telling you?
Well, you know, Don, the people I've spoken with, they're really flabbergasted that this happened so suddenly and so abruptly. So what we're learning is a little bit startling as to how this all went down. We understand that during the day today, it was Acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Bente. He was working the phones trying to get the word out to some of these U.S. attorneys. Well, then suddenly the media reports got out, also a press release from the Department of Justice itself, and that's how some of the U.S. attorneys found out that they would be asked for their resignation. This was very abrupt, and really, they're given just a few hours to clean out their desks and get out. But what's also interesting about this, Don, is that we understand that many U.S. attorneys had actually asked the administration where they stood. Would they be fired at some point? Would they be asked to stay on? And we understand that throughout the past few weeks, since the administration took effect January 20th, there was really radio silence. So they asked for it, they asked for some indication, but as we saw today, they got none.
Interesting. Laura, as Jessica is reporting, this isn't all, it's not that unusual, but the way it went down, is that unusual? What's your reaction?
Well, my reaction's kind of visceral for the reasons Jessica has already talked about. The idea that it's not unheard of that a new presidential administration would try to appoint people who were going to further their legal enforcement objectives and goals. Jeff Sessions has been very clear about how he'd like to break away from the Obama-era ways of enforcing, you know, drug policies, etc. That's not odd. Clinton has done it. You have, you know, every administration has done it. What is odd, however, is that they normally are allowed, for the sake of transition and uniformity, to have their seats filled before they actually leave. When you do it in this abrupt manner, and the U.S. attorneys are supposed to be confirmed by the Senate, you leave a vacancy in each of those 93 essentially districts, and you leave them wondering who is going to be their leader and how are we going to uniformly apply certain things. And so from that perspective, it's a very kind of knee-jerk reaction that was unnecessary.
Yeah, and no doubt, Laura, all these attorneys were in the middle of working on cases, right?
Yeah, and not to mention, it's not, you know, most presidents don't have these kind of lingering lawsuits across the country. Travel ban excluded, there's actually some Trump-specific litigation going on. And so you have the impression, however, that people are thinking, well, will the people who are resigning or being asked to resign, are they going to coincidentally be in the same jurisdiction that oversee Trump-related litigation? If that's the case, we're going to have to look very closely and figure out, well, is there a connection here? Is it benign or is there actually a connection here? And either way, this is why it's so important to keep in mind that the people that he has said do not have to resign are the people who are acting Deputy Attorney General and the person who is supposed to be the incoming Deputy Attorney General. Both people are already U.S. attorneys and are not being asked to step down because the administration presumably understands the importance of the continuity.
Yeah. Jessica, aren't we hearing from lawmakers on Capitol Hill about this? What are they saying?
Yeah, one notable lawmaker that we're hearing from, Don, is, of course, ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein. She says she is extremely concerned by this full-scale firing that happened today. She's especially concerned because she said that she actually had a meeting back in January with Vice President Pence and also the White House counsel, Donald McGahn. She said she asked them, would there be a case like this where there was just a full-scale firing and it happened all of a sudden? She said that she was assured by the White House counsel that anything that would be done in a very orderly fashion. But of course, Dianne Feinstein releasing a statement today saying that she is concerned by this and of course stating her opinion that this was not done in an orderly fashion at all.
I want to play this because back in November we heard from U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara after he met with then President Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, and he says he was asked to stay on. Watch this.
President-elect, asked, presumably because he's a New Yorker and is aware of the great work that our office has done over the past 7 years, asked to meet with me to discuss whether or not I'd be prepared to stay on as the United States Attorney, to do the work as we have done it, independently, without fear or favor for the last 7 years. We had a good meeting. I said I would absolutely consider staying on. I agreed to stay on. I have already spoken to Senator Sessions, who is, as you know, the nominee to be the Attorney General. He also asked that I stay on, and so I expect that I'll be continuing to work at the Southern District of New York.
So, Laura, but he ended up on the chopping block, and I heard one person on earlier saying, you know, it was because the Attorney General decided, well, maybe we don't want him. What do you think?
Well, surprise, first of all, for all the people who are the Obama-era, holdovers in this particular case. And the timing of this is so important. It should not escape people that within 24 hours of comments by Sean Hannity asking for a purge, and Sean Spicer talking about this kind of deep state theory that people are holding on to their positions with the intent to somehow undermine and fatally undermine this particular administration. So there is an insinuation being made right now that there is almost an epiphany that the president has had, or perhaps Jeff Sessions has had, that this deep state theory has somehow infected the U.S. attorney's offices across the country, and if they remain in place, they will somehow not be able to, one, carry out their objectives, or will do the opposite of their objectives. And so what you're seeing here is a timing issue that I think is surprising to everyone who is in place, not because the administration can't replace people, that's their prerogative, but because it seems to be in response to this fear that the people who we elect or appoint as U.S. attorneys, who are supposed to be objective enforcers of the law, somehow are incapable of doing just that.
Yeah. And I do have to say the White House is denying the whole Sean Hannity thing, but that's what they're saying this evening. But thank you all. Thank you. Have a great weekend. I appreciate it. I want to turn now to another piece of breaking news tonight. The White House acknowledging the Trump transition team knew about Michael Flynn's pro-Turkey lobbying during the campaign work that would likely require him to register his firm as a foreign agent. Press Secretary Sean Spicer facing tough questions on all of this at his press briefing today. Let's listen to this exchange with CNN's Athena Jones.
Are you saying the president was not aware that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was acting as a foreign agent when he appointed him to be National Security Advisor?
Correct. Well, and just remember, you wouldn't know that until he filed. He didn't file until 2 days ago, so therefore nobody would have known that because he hadn't filed as a foreign agent until 2 days ago.
My understanding is that you filed a lobbying disclosure with Congress in November.
Again, that's different than filing a FARA request with the DOJ. Well, it's one question Friday.
It's very much attached to this.
All right.
The other question is, did Flynn disclose he was acting as a foreign agent in the security clearance review before he became NSA?
I don't know the answer to that question. That's something that you should follow up with General Flynn on.
Bring in now Richard Painter, the chief White House ethics lawyer under George W. Bush, and CNN political commentator Matt Lewis. Gentlemen, good evening to both of you. I want to ask you, Mr. Painter, the White House is saying now that the president didn't know Flynn was being paid to represent Turkey during the campaign, and you heard what Sean Spicer said. What did you make of this?
Well, this is complete chaos. The Foreign Agents Registration Act has since the 1930s required foreign agents to register, and he should have been registered under the act, and he wasn't. And I can't believe that the transition team couldn't figure out that he was a foreign agent and inform the president. What kind of a country is it where we have foreign agents who are able to infiltrate the government without the president even knowing it, and take the top post in the National Security Council?
Did you understand Sean Spicer's response, Richard?
Yes, it made no sense, though. It made no sense that the president wouldn't know, that they wouldn't figure this out, that
Matt,
he was a foreign agent.
What did you think of Spicer's response? Did you understand what he was saying?
No, but that's pretty usual. I usually don't know what Sean Spicer means. But I would say this, look, my former colleague Chuck Ross at the Daily Caller broke the story on November 11th that this was going on, that Mike Flynn was working for this, Erdogan ally who was some Dutch company or whatever, but essentially lobbying on behalf of Turkey. So the fact that, and the Politico wrote about it too, so the fact that Donald Trump, his team, like, it didn't require a lot of really intricate vetting to find this out. You could have just read the news stories that happened on November 11th and found out that this was going on.
Well, Matt, I have
hiding
to say
in
that
plain sight.
it's interesting because I guess they read certain news accounts and maybe they want to believe they're fake or not. But even the stuff about Alpha Bank was reported as early as October or November, and it's coming around. People are confirming it again. I'm just wondering, Matt, if it's just what is going on that they are not even listening to news accounts there? This has all been in the news before, as you said.
And, you know, and Mike Flynn also wrote a piece for The Hill where he did not disclose that he was being paid to lobby, to say good things about Erdogan and Turkey and to attack their enemies. And The Hill just today posted, you know, like, you know, hey, by the way, you know, a sort of like update to that piece. But obviously, look, Donald Trump's team either, you know, I think it's not either or, probably wasn't terribly good at vetting and probably didn't care that much. I mean, look, one of his campaign managers was Paul Manafort. We know about his past ties to foreign governments. So I think that this wasn't treated as a big deal. But there's a difference between a guy who's a campaign manager and a guy who's your national security advisor, who 15 minutes ago was working for Turkey.
But it's worse than when you're the national security advisor and you're in charge of national security for the entire country and you don't disclose that, or his team either didn't disclose it to the president. I mean, that just seems like incompetence on many levels. And considering the hypocrisy of it all, Richard, when you talk about, hey, listen, lobbyists, President Trump, or even President-elect Donald Trump, and now as president, has said, you know, all this lobbying going on between people who work for the government, not for the government, we're going to crack down on that. And here's a guy who's closest to him in charge of national security is a lobbyist.
Yeah, it makes no sense to run a government this way and allow foreign agents into the government and have the president not even know, say you're draining the swamp, and yet you're bringing in people who have close ties to the Russians and other countries as well, and on the payroll of the Turkish government, and then the president doesn't know about it, or he says he doesn't know about it. I mean, this is a completely chaotic situation. And then General Flynn lied about his contacts with the Russians, lied to the vice president, and we've had the Attorney General in testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee say that he did not have contacts with the Russians when he had contacts with the Russians. People are not being honest about their foreign contacts, and talk about this deep state theory as if there are somehow Obama moles in the government undermining the Trump administration. It's ridiculous. I'm more worried about KGB agents running around the West Wing or in the National Security Council in this situation.
Wow.
It really needs to come under control.
That is a pretty strong, that's pretty strong, Richard.
Well, I've worked in the White House, and we vetted people. We would not have someone come into anywhere close to the White House, much less the National Security Council, who was a foreign agent, and that was not fully disclosed, vetted, and disclosed to the president.
Well, perhaps if they would have had some clue, if they had just taken a look at this article. I mean, Matt mentioned an article from The Hill, but this is one in November. It says, our ally Turkey is in crisis and needs our support. And then, you know, The Hill says Flynn never told them he was being paid to represent Turkey. I mean, Matt, what's going on here?
It's, you know, I mean, there's a lot of really important national security and lobbying and ethical things, but also just from a journalistic standpoint, this is super bad, right, too. And, you know, and he goes, one of those pieces in The Hill, he goes after this guy Gulen, who's, he calls a radical extremist who's an enemy of Turkey's Erdogan, and doesn't disclose that, hey, by the way, while I'm pressuring America to basically extradite this guy back to Turkey, where God knows what might happen to him, I'm getting paid something like $500,000 for a couple months' worth of work while he's advising the Republican nominee for president. Yeah. But here's the ultimate. I think it is interesting. that
and getting top secret
Flynn,
security briefings along with the president.
Right,
and let's not forget,
Mike,
General Flynn is the one who led. I think he may have started the lock her up chants during the campaign because he wanted Hillary Clinton to face legal trouble.
But there is. I would say this. The funny thing is, he was in the administration for 15 minutes, but he can never get paid to do this again. Now he's prohibited from ever
because
doing
of
foreign lobbying.
because of his former boss for 15
Yep.
minutes. So, Richard, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer was quick to tweet about the new jobs numbers out today. Great news for American workers. Economy added 235,000 new jobs. Unemployment rate drops to 4.7%. And first report for President for POTUS Trump. Well, that tweet just 22 minutes after the numbers came out apparently violates a federal rule barring executive branch employees for commenting for at least 1 hour. What's your reaction?
Well, it's just one more rule they want to ignore, I guess. This notion that the jobs numbers reflect who's in the White House after only well, less than 2 months. I mean, the whole thing is a farce. We've had an economy that's growing somewhat sluggishly, but growing for a number of years now. But the White House needs to get their act together, learn to play by the rules, and cut out the you know, the business where the press secretary is just shooting his mouth off and saying one thing, and then it turns out that there's something else going on. And the president doesn't even know who he's hiring. This is a very chaotic situation, and I don't think the fact that we have a growing economy and have for quite some time, that's not going to salvage this situation if they can't get their act together politically. And in terms of ethics and policy and follow the rules. We've had the White House ethics lawyers say that the rules don't apply to the White House staff. This is just one crisis after another, and I don't think that a growing economy is going to salvage this situation for the president if they don't straighten it out.
Yeah, in February 2016, it was 242,000 jobs, and any economist, even the economists who advise President Trump, says it's too early on to take, you know, to claim that they're responsible for these jobs numbers. But he's going to claim it anyway, and you know, he is the president. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.